The heavy oak doors of the federal courthouse groaned as I pushed them open. Every eye in that packed courtroom turned toward me. My daughter Sarah sat at the defendant's table, and when she saw me, she actually giggled, like I was some pathetic old fool who'd wandered into the wrong room. Brad, my son-in-law, immediately looked away, studying his hands like they held the secrets of the universe. But it was Judge William Thornton's reaction that silenced the room. The color drained from his face, his hand trembling as he whispered words that made everyone lean forward. My God, is that really him? Nobody had a clue who I really was until that day. 6 months before that courtroom drama, I was just David, a 68-year-old widower living in a modest 2-story house in Lakewood, Colorado. The neighborhood knew me as the quiet retiree who kept his lawn perfect and waved at passing joggers. I'd lost my Martha 2 years ago to cancer, and life had settled into a predictable routine of morning coffee, afternoon walks, and evening news. My daughter Sarah always seemed like the perfect child. At 42, she'd built a successful real estate business, married Brad, the financial advisor, and given me 2 wonderful grandchildren. Emma had just turned 16, all teenage rebellion and secret smiles. Ryan, 14, was quieter, more interested in video games than conversation. They lived in a beautiful house in Cherry Hills, the kind with a 3-car garage and a pool that looked straight out of a magazine. When Martha passed, Sarah stepped up. Or so I thought. She started visiting more often, bringing groceries I didn't need, and casseroles I'd never finish. "Dad, you need looking after," she'd say, patting my shoulder with manicured nails that clicked against her phone screen. That's what family does. The first sign something was wrong came on a Tuesday afternoon in April. Sarah arrived unannounced, carrying a stack of documents thick as a phone book. She spread them across my kitchen table, her smile bright enough to sell houses. "Just some tax paperwork, Dad. Nothing major. You know how complicated these things get." She pushed a pen into my hand, guiding me to signature lines marked with yellow sticky notes. "Sign here, initial here. I've already gone through everything with our accountant." I'd spent 30 years reading documents for a living, though Sarah didn't know the exact nature of my government work. Something felt off about her urgency, the way her eyes darted between me and the papers. But this was my daughter. Martha would have boxed my ears for doubting our Sarah. "What's this about transferring assets?" I asked, catching a glimpse of legal terminology between her perfectly painted fingernails. "Oh, that's just updating beneficiaries, making sure everything's in order. You know, after Mom." She let the sentence trail off, knowing exactly which emotional buttons to push. I signed. God help me, I signed. The visits became more frequent after that. Sarah would arrive when she knew I took my afternoon naps, claiming she was tidying up. But I'd wake to find desk drawers, slightly open filing cabinets, not quite closed properly. She developed a sudden interest in my health, too. "You seem tired, Dad. Have you been taking your medications? You know Dr. Morrison mentioned some new pills that might help with clarity. Just vitamins, really." She'd stand over me while I swallowed whatever pills she brought, watching like a hawk until they went down. Within a week, I was foggy. Simple tasks became mountains. Names of neighbors I'd known for years slipped away like smoke. Then came the phone call that changed everything. I'd dozed off in my recliner when Sarah's voice drifted from the kitchen. She must have thought I was deeper asleep than I was. "Just a few more weeks and we'll have power of attorney." She said, her voice different now. Harder. Calculating. "The old fool doesn't even remember what he owns. Brad, honey, trust me. He won't fight it. He can barely remember to put on matching socks." My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my breathing steady, feigning sleep. My own daughter. My Sarah, who I'd walked down the aisle just 15 years ago, who'd cried on my shoulder when Martha got her diagnosis. She saw me as nothing but a mark. The fog in my head wasn't natural. Those weren't vitamins. And whatever game she was playing, she'd already started telling the neighbors her version of my decline. Mrs. Patterson from next door had looked at me with such pity yesterday, asking if I needed help getting my mail. Tom Richards from 2 houses down offered to mow my lawn, mentioning Sarah had told him about my condition. But Sarah had made one crucial mistake. She thought she knew who I was. She thought 30 years of government work meant pushing papers in some forgotten office. She thought the quiet man who'd raised her was all I'd ever been. As I sat in that recliner listening to my daughter plan my destruction, something dormant stirred inside me. Something I'd buried when I chose family over career, when I decided being a father mattered more than being what I'd been before. Sarah had awakened something she didn't even know existed. And God help her, she was about to learn why some wolves choose sheep's clothing, not because they're weak, but because they're tired of hunting. 3 days after overhearing that phone call, I made my move. The local electronics store probably wondered why an old man needed such a small digital recorder, but cash talks and questions walk. I planted it inside the base of Martha's antique lamp in the living room, the one Sarah always admired but never touched. She thought it was too valuable. She had no idea how right she was. That Sunday, they came for dinner, like always. Sarah brought her famous pot roast, the one Martha's recipe card specifically said needed 2 hours in the oven, not 90 minutes like Sarah always did. Brad wore his weekend uniform of khakis and a polo shirt that cost more than most people's car payments. The grandkids trudged in behind them, Emma with her face buried in her phone, Ryan lugging his gaming laptop. I played my part perfectly, shuffled instead of walked, called Brad by the wrong name twice, even put salt in my coffee instead of sugar, making a confused face at the taste. Sarah's eyes lit up with every mistake I made. "Kids, why don't you go watch TV in the den?" Sarah suggested after dinner. "Grandpa needs to rest and we need to discuss some grown-up things." Emma looked up from her phone, something sharp in her gaze. She'd inherited the family intelligence, that one. But she went quietly pulling Ryan along. What that recorder captured over the next hour would have made Martha rise from her grave. "The Hoffman timeline needs to move up," Brad said, settling into my recliner like he already owned it. "Market's getting volatile. We need those assets liquid before the quarterly reports come out." "Dad's been taking the Don Pezzle I've been crushing into his vitamins," Sarah reported like some Nazi scientist discussing experiments. "Dr. Hoffman says another 2 weeks at this dosage, and he'll sign whatever competency evaluation we need." "What about the other accounts?" Brad pulled out his tablet, swiping through screens. "The main checking and savings only showed 300,000. This house is worth maybe 600. That's not enough to cover what I need." "He's got more hidden somewhere. Has to. 30 years of federal salary, Mom's life insurance, their investments. I've been through everything I can find, but you know Dad. Always secretive about finances." They went on to discuss details that made my stomach turn. Dr. Marcus Hoffman was apparently Brad's golf buddy, happy to diagnose dementia for the right price. They'd already transferred 200,000 from an account they'd somehow accessed, planning to claim I'd given them financial authority. There was talk of a nursing home in Aurora, the kind with violations stacked like cordwood, where they'd dump me once everything was signed over. "Found something interesting in the attic last week," Brad mentioned, chuckling. "Some old government ID badge, special agent something or other. Can you imagine your dad as any kind of agent? Probably just some administrative title they handed out to make desk jockeys feel important. He always acted like his job was some big secret." Sarah snorted. "Please, he was probably filing reports on agricultural subsidies or something equally thrilling." They'd been intercepting my mail, monitoring my phone calls, isolating me from friends who might notice changes. The medication wasn't just making me foggy. They were slowly poisoning me, creating symptoms that would match their fictional dementia diagnosis. But the worst revelation was yet to come. "What about your mother?" Brad asked. "Think she'll be a problem?" My mother's been dead for 2 years, genius, Sarah snapped. I mean Emma. She's been acting strange lately. Keeps asking about her grandfather wanting to visit him alone. She's 16. Everything's drama at that age. Besides, what's she going to do? Tell the police her parents are planning for Grandpa's future care. We're being responsible family members, that's all anyone will see. They left that evening with hugs and promises to see me next week. Sarah even kissed my cheek, and it took everything I had not to recoil from her touch. I waited a full hour before retrieving the recorder, my hands steady, despite the rage building in my chest. That night I sat in my study transcribing every word. Names, dates, amounts, plans. The methodology of their betrayal laid out like evidence in a case file, which I supposed is exactly what it was becoming. The knock on my door at 10 p.m. nearly made me jump out of my skin. I wasn't expecting anyone, and Sarah had keys. I peered through the peephole to see Emma standing on my porch, tears streaming down her face. Grandpa, I know you're awake. I saw your study light. Please, I need to talk to you. I opened the door, and my granddaughter fell into my arms, sobbing like her heart was breaking. I guided her inside, checking the street to make sure she'd come alone. They're monsters, she gasped between sobs. My own parents are monsters, and I didn't know who else to tell. Slow down, sweetheart. What happened? She pulled out her phone with shaking hands. I've been recording them for weeks, ever since I heard them laughing about putting you in a home. They don't know I know, but Grandpa, it's worse than just money. So much worse. What Emma showed me that night confirmed what the recorder had captured, and more. She had videos of her parents coaching Ryan on forging my signature. Audio of them discussing which nursing homes had the worst reputations for patient care. Screenshots of text messages between Brad and Dr. Hoffman, negotiating prices for false diagnoses. I'm sorry, Emma kept saying. I should have come sooner. I was scared. But when Mom made me help clean out Grandma's closet last month saying we needed to prepare the house for sale, I couldn't stand it anymore. I held my granddaughter while she cried, this brave child who'd chosen right over blood. When she finally calmed down, I made her some of Martha's chamomile tea, and we sat at the kitchen table where her parents had planned my destruction hours earlier. Emma, what you've done took incredible courage, but I need you to keep pretending you don't know. Can you do that? She nodded, wiping her eyes. Are you going to be okay? The medicine they're giving you? I'll be fine. I'm tougher than I look. I managed a smile that seemed to reassure her. But I need you to do something for me. Keep documenting everything, but be careful. And if anything happens to me, if I suddenly get sick or have an accident, you take everything straight to the FBI field office downtown. Ask for Special Agent Marcus Stone. Tell him David Brennan sent you. Her eyes widened. FBI Grandpa, who are you? Just a grandfather who loves you very much, and who's going to make sure your parents learn a very hard lesson about choosing money over family. After Emma left, I sat in Martha's chair surrounded by evidence of my daughter's betrayal. The woman I'd raised taught to ride a bike walked down the aisle, had chosen greed over love. She'd made her father a mark, never suspecting the mark might bite back. I reached for a burner phone I'd bought that morning and dialed a number I hadn't used in 5 years. Marcus Stone. Mark, it's David Brennan. I need you to dust off your investigator's license. I've got a case for you. David, Jesus, I thought you'd fallen off the grid. What kind of case? I looked at the recorder in my hand. Thought of Emma's tears, of Martha's lamp hiding secrets in plain sight. The kind where the wolf remembers how to hunt. Marcus Stone sat across from me at a truck stop diner 40 miles outside Denver, the kind of place where coffee came black and questions came never. He'd aged well in the 5 years since I'd seen him, though his hair had gone completely silver. 23 years in the FBI before going private had given him the kind of face that could fade into any crowd forgettable until you looked into his eyes and saw the steel there. You look like hell, David, he said, sliding a manila envelope across the scarred Formica table. Occupational hazard of being slowly poisoned by your offspring. I pushed my own envelope toward him, thick with transcripts, and Emma's flash drive. Though I've been palming most of the pills, enough to show symptoms when needed, not enough to actually scramble my brains. Marcus whistled low as he scanned the evidence. Your own daughter. Christ, David. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be thorough. I need everything on Brad's financial dealings. Sarah mentioned covering something, and I want to know what's got them desperate enough to destroy her own father. You could just arrest them now. This is already enough for elder abuse charges. I shook my head. That's not how you take down a conspiracy. You know that. You map the whole network, then you pull the trigger. Speaking of which, I need another favor. I slid a third envelope across this one, containing a single piece of paper. Marcus read it, and his eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. You want me to call Judge William Thornton? Your old protege David, what are you planning? Justice Mark, the kind that reminds people why they used to call me the Wolf. 3 decades. That's how long I'd spent in federal prosecution before retiring 13 years ago. Not the paper-pushing bureaucrat Sarah imagined, but the kind of prosecutor who made crime families nervous and corrupt politicians lose sleep. I'd taken down the Torino family's money laundering operation, exposed Senator Blackwood's bribery scheme, and put away more white-collar criminals than anyone else in the Western District. The media had nicknamed me the Wolf after the Torino case. Vincent Torino himself had screamed it during sentencing. You're nothing but a wolf in sheep's clothing, Brennan. The name stuck. Prosecutors loved it. Defense attorneys learned to fear it. But when the threats started coming, when they began targeting Martha and baby Sarah, I made a choice. Took an early retirement, moved to suburbia, became invisible. David Brennan, the prosecutor, vanished, replaced by David, the father. David, the neighbor. David, the nobody. Now my daughter was about to learn why wolves never truly forget how to hunt. Marcus got to work fast. Within a week, he'd uncovered the rot at the core of Brad's financial advisory firm. My son-in-law wasn't just desperate. He was drowning. Classic Ponzi scheme. Marcus explained, spreading financial documents across my dining room table. Been running for 3 years. He's been using new investor money to pay returns to earlier investors. The whole thing's about to collapse. How much? Conservative estimate, 12 million. Maybe more. Most of his victims are retirees, elderly folks who trusted him with their life savings. I thought of Martha's parents, how they'd lost everything to a similar scheme in the 80s. She'd made me promise to always protect the vulnerable. Even from our own family, apparently. He needs my money to cover the shortfall before his next audit, I said. It wasn't a question. That's my read. Sarah knows about it, too. Her real estate business has been funneling money to cover Brad's tracks. They're both in this up to their necks. The investigation expanded. I had Marcus put surveillance on Dr. Hoffman, documenting his off-the-books meetings with Brad. We tracked every forged document, every fraudulent transfer. Emma continued her dangerous work as my inside source, providing recordings that would make any jury weep with rage. Meanwhile, I perfected my performance. Each week brought new symptoms carefully calibrated to match their poisoning schedule. I stumbled over words, forgot appointments, even called Sarah by Martha's name once. She practically glowed with satisfaction. We should schedule that competency hearing soon. She mentioned one afternoon watching me struggle with simple tasks. Just to make things official. You understand, don't you, Dad? We just want what's best. Whatever you think is right, sweetheart. I mumbled, letting my hand shake as I reached for the water glass. Behind the facade, I was building a case that would have made my younger self proud. I opened safety deposit boxes at 3 different banks, storing evidence and backup drives. Set up hidden cameras in my home, courtesy of Mark's surveillance expertise. Even established a new bank account under a trust Sarah didn't know existed, moving the bulk of my actual assets beyond their reach. The call to Judge Thornton went better than expected. David Brennan, he said, voice thick with emotion. I'd heard you'd disappeared into retirement. How are you, mentor? I've been better, Bill. I need your help. Quietly. Anything. You know that. I wouldn't be a judge without your guidance. I need you to be ready for a case that's going to cross your desk. Elder abuse fraud, possibly more. The defendants are going to request a specific hearing date for a competency evaluation. I need you to make sure you're the assigned judge. David, what's going on? The kind of injustice that makes me remember why we chose this profession. Will you help? You trained me, David. Taught me that justice isn't about the law. It's about protecting those who can't protect themselves. Of course I'll help. The next phase required delicate timing. I had Emma plant seeds of doubt in her mother's mind about the house's value. Mom, I was doing a school project on property values, and Grandpa's neighborhood is worth way more than you think. Like some houses are selling for over $1 million. Sarah's greed kicked into overdrive. She hired 3 different appraisers, each time growing more excited as the estimates climbed. She never noticed they were all recommended by a helpful neighbor who happened to be one of Mark's contacts. Dad, we need to talk about your estate planning, she announced one Sunday, practically vibrating with fake concern. This house is too much for you to maintain. Maybe it's time to consider something smaller, more manageable. If you think that's best, I agreed, noting how Brad's eyes lit up at my easy compliance. Dr. Hoffman proved even easier to trap. Mark's surveillance caught him accepting a $50,000 cash payment from Brad in a parking garage, counting it bill by bill, like some movie villain. We had video from 6 angles audio clear as a bell. The good doctor had no idea he'd just signed his own arrest warrant. The competency hearing was scheduled for June 15th. Sarah could barely contain her anticipation. She'd already picked out new furniture for my house, discussing renovations with contractors who thought she was planning for her poor father's transition to assisted living. But the real revelation came from Ryan, of all people. My 14-year-old grandson appeared at my door one evening, Emma hovering protectively behind him. Tell him, she urged. Tell Grandpa what you told me. Ryan couldn't meet my eyes. They made me practice your signature 100 times. Said it was for a school project about handwriting. But I heard Dad on the phone saying the forged checks would pass because a kid's handwriting looks shaky like an old person's. My grandson broke down crying. I didn't know, Grandpa. I swear I didn't know what they were really doing. When Emma told me, I wanted to throw up. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I held both my grandchildren, these brave souls who'd chosen truth over comfort. You have nothing to apologize for, Ryan. They used you. But you're helping make it right. And that takes real courage. That night, I called Mark with a final instruction. Contact the FBI. It's time to make this federal. Brad's scheme crosses state lines, and they've involved a minor in fraud. I want the full weight of justice to fall on them. You sure about this, David? Once we involve the feds, there's no going back. This is your daughter we're talking about. I thought of Sarah's giggling contempt of Brad's casual cruelty of elderly victims losing their life savings of my grandchildren, forced to participate in crimes against their own grandfather. My daughter died the day she decided money mattered more than family. What's left is just a criminal who happens to share my DNA. Make the call. The trap was set. The wolves were circling. And Sarah was about to learn that sometimes the sheep you're stalking turns out to have very sharp teeth. June 15th couldn't come fast enough. The morning of June first arrived with Sarah's BMW pulling into my driveway at 7 a.m. sharp. She had a briefcase and the determined look of a hunter closing in on wounded prey. I watched from my bedroom window as she paused to check her reflection in the car mirror, adjusting her perfect smile. Dad, we need to talk about next week's hearing, she announced, letting herself in with the key she'd copied without permission. I've brought all the paperwork. Dr. Hoffman has been so helpful with documenting your condition. I shuffled downstairs in my robe, making sure to grip the handrail like it was the only thing keeping me upright. The performance had become second nature, though the fury underneath grew with each passing day. What hearing, dear? I asked, adding the perfect note of confusion to my voice. Sarah's smile widened. Remember, we discussed this. It's just a formality to help protect your assets. Make sure everything's handled properly. She spread documents across the kitchen table while brewing coffee, humming Martha's favorite hymn. The blasphemy of it made my jaw clench, but I maintained my vacant expression. Among the papers, I spotted what they really wanted: full power of attorney asset transfer authorizations, even a pre-signed admission form for Sunset Manor, the nursing home Brad had chosen. Dr. Hoffman will be there to explain your medical situation. Sarah continued sliding a pen into my hand. Just sign these now so we don't have to worry about it later. Shouldn't I read them first? A flicker of the old David quickly suppressed. Oh, Dad. She patted my hand condescendingly. That's why you have me, to handle these complicated things. Just sign where the arrows are. I signed David Matthews 3 times before she noticed. Dad, that's not your name. See, you're confused. This is exactly why we need this hearing. While she fixed the signatures, I palmed the digital recorder I'd hidden under the table edge. Sarah, why are you doing this? I thought you loved me. For just a moment, her mask slipped. Love doesn't pay bills, Dad. Love didn't help when Brad's business hit rough patches. Love won't keep my kids in private school or pay for Emma's college. You're sitting on money you'll never use, hoarding it like some dragon while we struggle. I never knew you were struggling. You never asked for help. Because you would have said no. Just like you said no when I wanted to expand my business when Brad needed startup capital. Always so righteous, so careful with money. Well, careful doesn't help your family, Dad. This does. She didn't know Marcus Stone was parked 2 houses down, his equipment recording every word through the wire I wore. She didn't know the FBI had been building their case for 2 weeks, documenting her every move. She definitely didn't know about the email Emma had sent me that morning. Grandpa, emergency. Found Dad's real books. It's not 12 million. It's 23 million. He's got a plane ticket to Costa Rica for June 20th. One way. The same day they planned to have me declared incompetent and seize everything. That afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Dr. Marcus Hoffman himself appeared at my door, medical bag in hand, and Sarah at his shoulder. Mr. Brennan, your daughter asked me to do a house call. Check how you're doing with the new medications. I let them in, noting how Hoffman's eyes darted around, probably calculating the house's value. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with the soft look of a man who'd chosen easy money over medical ethics. Let's check your cognitive function, he said, pulling out a tablet. Simple questions. What year is it? I gave him the wrong year. He smiled and typed notes. Can you count backward from 100 by 7s? I stopped at 86, looking confused. More typing, more smiles. Now I need to ask about any hallucinations. Have you been seeing things that aren't there? Hearing voices. Sometimes I think I hear Martha. I said truthfully. Late at night I hear her telling me to be careful, to watch out for wolves dressed like sheep. Hoffman and Sarah exchanged glances. He continued his charade of an examination, checking reflexes I deliberately delayed, testing memory I pretended not to have. All while the camera in Martha's bookshelf recorded every fraudulent second. I'll have my full report ready for the hearing, Hoffman assured Sarah as they prepared to leave. The progression is exactly as we discussed. Classic moderate stage dementia with paranoid features. After they left, I called Mark. Did you get all that? Crystal clear. Hoffman even mentioned the payment schedule for his testimony. We've got him dead to rights. Good. Now for phase 2. I want you to contact those 3 investors from Brad's list, the ones who lost the most. Let them know they might want to attend a certain hearing next week. Tell them justice has a long memory. The week leading to the hearing became a chess match played in my own home. Sarah installed cameras, not knowing I'd already found, and was feeding them false footage. Brad started spending evenings in my study photographing documents he thought were real, while the actual papers sat in a bank vault downtown. Emma proved invaluable, warning me when her parents planned surprises, like the time Sarah tried to have me involuntarily hospitalized for evaluation. Emma texted me just in time to take the correct dose of medication, passing the ER doctor's tests perfectly. Your daughter seems very concerned. the doctor told me privately. But I see no immediate need for psychiatric hold, though you might want to ask why she was so insistent. Ryan, meanwhile, struggled with guilt over his unwitting participation. I found him crying in my garage one afternoon, holding a box of his grandmother's Christmas ornaments. "She would hate me," he sobbed. "Grandma would hate what I did." "Your grandmother would be proud that you told the truth," I assured him. "It takes a strong person to admit when they've been used and do something about it. Mom says family sticks together no matter what. But what if family asks you to do wrong things? Then they're not acting like family anymore, son. Real family protects each other not from justice but from doing wrong in the first place." 3 days before the hearing, Judge Thornton called me privately. "David, I've reviewed the preliminary filings. This is uglier than you indicated. Are you certain you want to proceed? Once this enters my courtroom, I can't show favoritism." "Bill, I'm not asking for favoritism, just justice, and maybe a little theatrical timing when you recognize me." "The prosecutor's flair for drama, you haven't changed. Very well, I'll be ready." Sarah's confidence grew as the hearing approached. She'd already listed my house with her agency, though not publicly yet. Brad had meetings with wealth managers planning how to invest their windfall. They even discussed European vacations at dinner right in front of me, as if I were already gone. The FBI, meanwhile, had expanded their investigation. Brad's Ponzi scheme touched 4 states. They'd found offshore accounts, shell companies, a web of deceit that would have impressed the crime families I once prosecuted. More importantly, they'd identified 43 elderly victims who'd lost their retirements to Brad's promises. June 14th, the day before the hearing, Sarah made her final move. She arrived with a moving truck and a crew claiming she needed to start organizing things. "Just some of Mom's old clothes for charity," she said breezily. "And some furniture that needs updating. We want the house to show well." I watched from my chair as they loaded Martha's china cabinet, the one her grandmother had brought from Ireland. Took the silver we'd received as wedding gifts. Even grabbed photo albums, probably to erase evidence of happier times. Each item they stole added another count to their eventual indictment. Emma appeared at my elbow, tears streaming. "I'm recording everything, Grandpa, every single thing they take." "Good girl. After tomorrow we'll get it all back, and they'll learn what it costs to steal from family." That night I couldn't sleep. Not from worry, but from anticipation. Tomorrow the trap would spring. Tomorrow Sarah would walk into that courtroom expecting to destroy her father and walk out wealthy. She had no idea she'd be walking out in handcuffs instead. I stood at Martha's grave at dawn, placing fresh roses on the headstone. "I'm sorry, love," I whispered. "Sorry I couldn't save our daughter from herself, but I'll save our grandchildren, and I'll make sure she faces justice for what she's become." A red cardinal landed on the headstone, singing its morning song. Martha always said cardinals were messages from heaven. I chose to take it as approval. The hearing was set for 10 a.m. By 9:45, the courtroom would be packed with FBI agents, Brad's victims, and reporters who'd received anonymous tips about a major financial fraud case. Sarah thought she was walking into her triumph. She was actually walking into the wolf's den. And after 30 years of sleeping, the wolf was fully awake. The federal courthouse in downtown Denver hadn't changed much in the 13 years since my retirement. Same marble floors that echoed with purposeful footsteps. Same oak-paneled courtrooms that had witnessed countless pursuits of justice. But I'd never imagined returning here to face my own daughter as a defendant. I arrived early, taking my time with the security screening. The guards were new, didn't recognize me. Good. The element of surprise was crucial. I wore my old charcoal suit, the one Martha always said made me look distinguished. Not the shuffling old man Sarah expected, but not quite the prosecutor I'd been either. That revelation would come later. The courtroom filled quickly. Sarah and Brad entered with their lawyer, Theodore Krensky, a bottom feeder I'd faced twice during my career. Both times he'd lost badly. Clearly, my daughter hadn't done her research when choosing representation. What made my heart sink was seeing them so confident. Sarah wore her best red dress, the one she'd worn to win Real Estate Agent of the Year. Brad had his lucky cufflinks, the ones he claimed closed every big deal. They whispered and smiled occasionally, glancing at the door, waiting for their decrepit victim to shuffle in. Behind them, the gallery filled with unexpected faces. Mrs. Chen, who'd lost her husband's life insurance to Brad's scheme. Robert Thurman, the retired teacher who'd invested his entire pension. Agnes Murphy, 91 years old, who'd trusted Brad because he reminded her of her grandson. Mark had done his job well, ensuring the victims knew when and where to seek their justice. FBI agents filtered in quietly, taking strategic positions. The court reporter set up her equipment. The bailiff checked his watch. 9:58. At 9:59, Dr. Marcus Hoffman entered, looking nervous. He'd been promised immunity for his testimony against my family, though he didn't know the FBI had their own plans for him afterward. Perjury and fraud were still crimes, even with a cooperation agreement. Then Judge William Thornton entered, and the bailiff called, "All rise." As everyone stood, I made my entrance. The heavy doors swung open and I walked in. Not shuffled. Walked. Head high, shoulders back, with the purposeful stride that had once made defense attorneys reach for their antacids. The sound of my footsteps on marble rang clear and strong. Sarah's giggle hit me like a slap. High, mocking, utterly confident in her victory. She nudged Brad, whispering something that made him smirk. But he had the sense to look away when our eyes met, suddenly fascinated by his legal pad. It was Judge Thornton's reaction that changed everything. He'd been reaching for his gavel when he saw me. His hand froze midway, trembling slightly. The color drained from his face as recognition dawned. His mouth opened, opened again. "My God," he whispered, his voice carrying in the sudden silence. "Is that really him?" Every head in the courtroom swiveled between us. Whispers rippled through the gallery. The court reporter's fingers hesitated over her keys. Even the FBI agents shifted, sensing the electricity in the air. "Your Honor," Krensky ventured, confused by the break in protocol. Judge Thornton composed himself with visible effort. "My apologies. Please everyone be seated. We're here for the matter of Brennan versus Brennan, a competency hearing requested by Sarah and Bradley Morrison." But his eyes never left mine. In them I saw the young prosecutor I'd trained 25 years ago, the one who'd nervously presented his first case while I sat second chair. The one who'd said at my retirement party that I was the reason he'd become a judge. "Would the petitioners please present their case?" Judge Thornton managed his voice steadier now. Krensky stood smooth as oil. "Your Honor, we're here today because David Brennan, age 68, has shown clear signs of dementia and cognitive decline. His daughter Sarah Morrison seeks power of attorney to protect his assets and ensure proper care." "I see. And Mr. Brennan, are you represented by counsel?" This was the moment. I stood slowly, letting them all see me clearly. "No, Your Honor. I'll be representing myself." Sarah actually laughed out loud. "Dad, you can't represent yourself. You're not a lawyer. This is exactly what we're talking about, this confusion." I turned to face my daughter, and for the first time in 6 months, I didn't hide who I was. "Actually, Sarah, I am a lawyer. Harvard Law class of 1979, admitted to the Colorado bar in 1980. And while my license went inactive when I retired, I reactivated it 3 weeks ago." The laughter died in her throat. "Furthermore, I continued my voice, carrying the authority of 3 decades in these halls. I spent 30 years as a federal prosecutor in this very courthouse, special agent in charge of Financial Crimes Division, lead prosecutor on 43 major cases, including United States versus Torino, which I believe is still taught in law schools as the definitive RICO prosecution." Krensky had gone pale. You're David the Wolf Brennan." "I prefer just David these days, though it seems my daughter has given me reason to remember why I earned that nickname." "Objection," Krensky stammered. This This is clearly a delusion. My client's father is confused, creating false identities. Judge Thornton leaned forward. Mr. Krensky, I can assure you there's no confusion. I know exactly who David Brennan is. He trained me, mentored me, and if he says he's representing himself, then God help you, because you're about to face one of the finest legal minds this court has ever seen. The courtroom erupted. Reporters scribbled frantically. The victims leaned forward with sudden hope. FBI agents smiled grimly. And Sarah's confidence cracked like an egg, revealing the fear underneath. Your Honor, I said calmly, I move to dismiss this competency hearing as fraudulent and request immediate countercharges be filed. On what grounds? On the grounds that the medical testimony is fabricated, the financial documents are forged, and the petitioners have been systematically poisoning me while stealing my assets. I have evidence, Your Honor. Extensive evidence. Dad, what are you doing? Sarah's voice had gone shrill. You're sick. You need help. Tell them about the confusion, the memory loss. You mean the symptoms caused by the Donpezil you've been crushing into my vitamins? The confusion you manufactured to steal from me? Yes. Sarah, let's definitely discuss that. Brad shot to his feet. This is insane. He's clearly delusional. Sit down, Mr. Morrison, Judge Thornton ordered, and consider your next words very carefully. You're in my courtroom now. Your Honor. I continued, with the court's permission, I'd like to present evidence that will show not only am I fully competent, but that the petitioners have engaged in a criminal conspiracy involving elder abuse fraud, poisoning, and theft. Objection. Krensky was sweating now. This is a simple competency hearing, not a criminal trial. You're right, Judge Thornton agreed, which is why I'm suspending this hearing. He turned to the FBI agents. Agents, I believe you have warrants to execute. Sarah's scream could probably be heard 3 floors down. No, you can't do this. He's senile. Tell them Dr. Hoffman. Tell them about his condition. Dr. Hoffman stood shakily. I need to speak with my attorney. You'll have plenty of time for that, Agent Patricia Coleman said, approaching with handcuffs. Dr. Marcus Hoffman, you're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy to commit elder abuse, and falsifying medical records. Brad Morrison. Agent David Park announced, you're under arrest for running a Ponzi scheme, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Daddy. Sarah turned to me, tears streaming. Daddy, please, I'm your daughter. How can you do this? You stopped being my daughter the day you decided to poison me for money. I replied, my voice steady despite the pain. The day you laughed at my supposed weakness. The day you involved your own children in your crimes. Your Honor, Agent Coleman addressed the judge. We also have a warrant for Sarah Morrison. Elder abuse, fraud, conspiracy, theft. As they cuffed my daughter, she kept screaming. About family loyalty, about how I'd destroyed her life, about how mothers were watching from heaven. That last one almost broke me, but I held firm. Mr. Brennan, Judge Thornton said quietly, I'm sorry you had to go through this. Is there anything else the court should know? I looked around the courtroom at Brad's victims, my grandchildren in the back row with Mark, the agents leading my daughter away. Yes, Your Honor. I request immediate custody of my minor grandchildren, and I move that all stolen assets be frozen pending full restitution to Mr. Morrison's fraud victims. Granted on both counts. He banged his gavel. This hearing is adjourned. We'll reconvene for formal criminal proceedings as scheduled by the prosecutor's office. As the courtroom cleared, I found myself face to face with Theodore Krensky. I had no idea, he stammered. They told me you were just some retired nobody. I never would have, you never would have taken the case if you'd known you were facing me. I finished. That's the problem with attorneys like you, Krensky. You don't care about justice, only about easy wins. Well, congratulations. You just helped expose one of the largest elder fraud cases in Colorado history. I'm sure the Bar Association will be very interested in your role. He fled like his shoes were on fire. Emma and Ryan approached tentatively. Behind them, Mark Stone grinned like he'd won the lottery. "Grandpa," Emma said softly, "are you really this famous prosecutor?" I was. Now I'm just your grandfather who loves you very much, and who's going to make sure you never have to be ashamed of your family name again. "What's going to happen to Mom and Dad?" Ryan asked, voice small. "They're going to face justice for what they've done, but more importantly, they're going to have time to think about their choices, maybe learn from them, maybe become better people." "Will you tell us," Emma asked, "about who you really were about the cases and the criminals?" I thought of Martha, how she'd wanted our children to know their father as more than just the quiet man who came home for dinner. How she'd worried I was hiding too much of myself. "Yes," I promised. "I'll tell you everything. But first, let's go home. We have a lot of healing to do." As we left the courthouse, reporters shouted questions. "Mr. Brennan, how does it feel to prosecute your own daughter? Will you return to practice? Is it true you're the Wolf of Denver?" I ignored them all, focusing on my grandchildren. But as we reached the door, I turned back to see Judge Thornton watching from his courtroom entrance. "Thank you, Bill," I called out. "No, mentor, thank you, for reminding me why we do this job. Justice doesn't play favorites, not even for family." Outside, the Denver sun felt warm on my face. I'd entered that courthouse as a victim. I left as myself again. The wolf hadn't forgotten how to hunt after all. He'd just been waiting for the right moment to protect his pack. The criminal trial was set for 3 weeks after the initial hearing. During that time, my house transformed from a crime scene to a war room. FBI agents came and went, boxes of evidence multiplied, and slowly the full scope of Sarah and Brad's crimes emerged like an oil spill spreading across water. Emma and Ryan had moved in with me immediately after their parents' arrest. The first few nights were rough. Ryan had nightmares about testifying. Emma barely ate, torn between loyalty to her parents and disgust at their actions. We spent long evenings at the kitchen table, sometimes talking, sometimes just sitting in silence, learning how to be a family again. "Grandpa," Emma asked one evening, "why didn't you tell anyone who you really were? Why hide it?" I set down my coffee, choosing my words carefully. "When your mother was 7, a man I'd sent to prison got out on parole. He came to our house one night while I was working late. Your grandmother was alone with Sarah. He didn't hurt them, thank God, but he painted a message on our garage. 'The Wolf's family bleeds too.'" Ryan's eyes widened. "Someone threatened Mom because of your job." "Several someones over the years. So when I retired, I buried that part of myself, became invisible. I thought if I was just quiet, David Brennan, nobody special, my family would be safe." I managed a bitter smile. I never imagined the threat would come from inside the family itself. The media coverage was relentless. "The Wolf returns," screamed headlines. "Legendary prosecutor betrayed by own daughter." My phone rang constantly with interview requests, book deals, even a movie option. I ignored them all. This wasn't about fame or vindication. It was about justice. Mark Stone became a daily fixture, helping prepare for trial. "The prosecutor's office wants to know if you'll consult," he informed me one morning. "They're good, but you know these types of cases better than anyone. Tell them I'll review their strategy, but I stay in the background. This is their show now." The evidence was overwhelming. We had recordings, videos, financial documents, forged signatures. The FBI had traced Brad's scheme across state lines, finding victims in Nevada, Arizona, and New Mexico. The total had risen to $32 million, affecting 67 families. Some had lost everything. Dr. Hoffman flipped, completely desperate to reduce his sentence. His testimony revealed details that sickened me. The specific doses of medication designed to mimic dementia. The coaching sessions where Sarah taught him my mannerisms to make his lies more believable. The price list for false diagnoses like a menu of medical malpractice. But the worst revelation came from Brad's seized computers. He hadn't just been planning to flee to Costa Rica. He'd purchased life insurance policies on me with Sarah as beneficiary. The implications were clear. If the competency hearing had failed, I might have had an accident. The trial began on a Tuesday morning. The courthouse was packed with overflow crowds watching on screens in adjacent rooms. I sat with Emma and Ryan in the front row, directly behind the prosecution table. Sarah and Brad in orange jumpsuits sat with their new attorneys, both public defenders, since their assets had been frozen. Sarah wouldn't look at me. She kept her eyes fixed on the table, shoulders hunched. Brad attempted defiance, but it crumbled when the first victim testified. Agnes Murphy, 91 years old, took the stand with a walker, but a voice clear as a bell. Mr. Morrison told me he was investing my money in government bonds. Safe, he said. Secure. I gave him everything. $300,000. My husband's life work. And what happened to that money? The prosecutor asked. Gone. All of it. I had to move in with my daughter. At my age, starting over. She looked directly at Brad. I trusted you because you said you were a family man. Said your father-in-law was in finance too, that it ran in the family. One by one they testified. Teachers, firefighters, small business owners. People who'd worked their entire lives and trusted the wrong person. With each story, Sarah seemed to shrink further into herself. When it came time for the prosecution's main case, they called me to testify. I hadn't wanted to, but the prosecutor insisted my testimony would seal the case. State your name for the record. David Alexander Brennan. Mr. Brennan, please tell the court about your professional background. For the first time in 13 years, I publicly recounted my career. The cases, the convictions, the threats that drove me underground. The courtroom was silent except for the court reporter's keys, and Sarah's quiet sobbing. And why did you hide this background from your family? To protect them. I thought if I was nobody special, they'd be safe from my past. I looked at Sarah, then finally catching her eye. I never imagined they'd become the very criminals I used to prosecute. The prosecutor walked me through the evidence methodically. The poisoning, the forgery, the theft. I kept my voice clinical professional, but inside each word was a knife. This was my daughter. My little girl who used to demand bedtime stories about the good guys catching the bad guys. Mr. Brennan, please describe the effects of the medication they were giving you. Confusion, memory gaps, tremors, classic dementia symptoms. If I hadn't been suspicious enough to palm most of the pills, I'd probably be in a nursing home by now. Or worse. Objection, Sarah's lawyer called out. Speculation. Sustained, the judge ruled, though everyone had heard it. The defense's cross-examination tried to paint me as a cold father who'd chosen career over family. They brought up every missed recital every late night at the office, every time Martha had to explain why Daddy couldn't make it to dinner. Isn't it true you were absent for much of Sarah's childhood? I worked long hours, yes, putting criminals in prison. Criminals like your daughter? I paused, feeling the weight of 30 years of choices. I spent my career believing that justice mattered more than convenience, that doing right was worth any personal cost. If that makes me a bad father, then yes, I'm guilty. But it doesn't excuse what they did. When Dr. Hoffman testified, his medical license already suspended, he revealed the full extent of the conspiracy. Sarah had researched dementia symptoms for months, studying how to fake them convincingly. She'd practiced concerned daughter routines in the mirror. She'd even joined online support groups for families with dementia patients, mining them for details to make her performance more believable. The turning point came when Emma testified. My granddaughter, just 16, took the stand with a courage that would have made Martha proud. They made lists, she said, voice steady despite her tears. Mom had a notebook where she tracked Grandpa's symptoms, checking off each one as it appeared, like a shopping list, and Dad would joke about it at dinner, called it Project Inheritance. How did that make you feel? Sick, ashamed, angry. Emma looked at her parents. They taught me that family was everything. Then they tried to destroy the most important person in our family for money. Ryan testified next, describing how they'd made him practice forging signatures, how they'd told him it was a game, how he'd cried himself to sleep when he learned the truth. The defense barely tried. What could they say? The evidence was overwhelming, the victims too numerous, the crimes too cruel. Their only strategy was to blame each other. Brad claimed Sarah masterminded everything. Sarah insisted Brad corrupted her with his financial desperation. Closing arguments took a full day. The prosecutor painted a picture of greed so profound it consumed family bonds. The defense begged for mercy, citing clean records and community involvement. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. On the count of elder abuse, we find Sarah Morrison guilty. On the count of fraud, we find Bradley Morrison guilty. On the count of running a Ponzi scheme, we find Bradley Morrison guilty. On and on, 43 counts between them, guilty on every single one. At sentencing 2 weeks later, Judge Patricia Hawkins allowed victim impact statements. I hadn't planned to speak, but when the moment came, I stood. Your Honor, I've spent my life pursuing justice. I've seen humanity at its worst. But nothing prepared me for the betrayal of being victimized by my own child. Sarah didn't just try to steal money. She tried to steal my dignity, my identity, my very self. She made me question every memory of her childhood, wondering where I went wrong. I turned to Sarah, who was sobbing uncontrollably. But I want you to know something, Sarah. Despite everything, I don't hate you. I hate what you became, what you did, but not you. I hope prison gives you what you never found in freedom, the understanding that love and money are not the same currency. Judge Hawkins sentenced Brad to 25 years with mandatory restitution to all victims. Sarah received 15 years with possibility of parole in 10. They were led away separately, their marriage another casualty of their greed. Outside the courthouse, Brad's victims surrounded me. Agnes Murphy took my hands in her weathered ones. Thank you for fighting back. For all of us who couldn't. Everyone deserves justice, I replied, even from family, especially from family. The media wanted statements, analysis, interviews. I gave them one quote. The law doesn't recognize blood relations when it comes to crime. Neither should we. That night, Emma, Ryan, and I sat around the dinner table, the house quiet, without the chaos of trials and testimony. What happens now? Ryan asked. Now we rebuild, I said. We learn from this. We become better than what tried to break us. Will we visit them in prison? I considered carefully. That's your choice. I won't stop you if you want to. They're still your parents despite everything. Emma nodded slowly. Maybe. Someday. When it doesn't hurt so much. We cleared the table together, a simple domestic act that felt like healing. In the living room, I noticed Martha's lamp, the one that had hidden the first recorder. Evidence had finally returned it along with everything else Sarah and Brad had stolen. I thought about the wolf, that younger version of myself who'd stalked criminals through legal briefs and courtroom dramatics. He'd gone to sleep for 13 years thinking his job was done. But wolves, I'd learned, never really retire. They just wait until the pack needs protecting again. And sometimes the greatest threat comes from within the pack itself. 2 years passed before I saw Sarah again. The letter arrived on a cold February morning, her handwriting still recognizable, despite the prison-issued pen. Emma found it first, holding the envelope like it might explode. It's from Mom, she said, simply placing it on the kitchen counter. Ryan looked up from his homework. At 16 now, he'd grown thoughtful and serious, the trauma of his parents' crimes aging him beyond his years. Are you going to read it? That's up to your grandfather, Emma replied. She was 18, about to start college at Colorado University, planning to study law. The trial had changed her transformed teenage rebellion into a fierce dedication to justice. I picked up the envelope, feeling its weight. Give me some time alone. In my study, surrounded by law books and memories, I opened my daughter's letter. Dad, I've written this letter 100 times. Each version sounds more pathetic than the last. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm writing because my therapist says I need to acknowledge what I've done, not to ease my guilt, but to maybe help you understand. I forgot who you were. Not your career, but you. The man who stayed up all night when I had pneumonia, who taught me to ride a bike in Wash Park running beside me for hours, who cried at my wedding trying to hide it behind your handkerchief. Somewhere I started seeing you as an obstacle to the life I thought I deserved. Brad's schemes my greed, they found fertile ground in my entitlement. I convinced myself you owed me success, that your money was my birthright. I poisoned you, Dad. Not just with pills, but with betrayal so profound it poisons me now. Every night I dream of your face in that courtroom. The moment you stood tall and spoke clear. The moment I realized I'd tried to destroy someone extraordinary thinking he was ordinary. The other inmates know who I am. The prosecutor's daughter, they whisper. Some think it's poetic justice. Others just think I'm stupid. They're all right. I work in the prison library now. I've been reading your old cases. The Torino trial transcripts, the Blackwood corruption case, learning who you really were, who you still are. The Wolf of Denver didn't just prosecute criminals. He protected the innocent, and I became one of the predators you spent your life caging. I don't ask for visits, don't ask for forgiveness. I ask only that you know this. I will spend whatever time I have left becoming someone worthy of being David Brennan's daughter again. Not for parole, not for inheritance, but because the shame of what I've become is the only truth I have left. Ryan wrote me about starting high school. Emma sent a photo from her graduation. They're becoming remarkable people under your care. The irony isn't lost on me. I tried to steal their grandfather and instead gave them the gift of really knowing him. Take care of them. Love them. Teach them what you tried to teach me before greed made me deaf. Your daughter in biology, only Sarah. I set the letter down staring at the February snow falling outside. Martha would have cried, would have wanted to rush to the prison immediately. But Martha always saw the best in people even when it wasn't there yet. 3 months later, I stood outside the Federal Correctional Institution in Englewood. Emma and Ryan waited in the car, their choice to come, but not to enter. Not yet. The visiting room was sterile gray, filled with families trying to bridge the gap between love and consequence. Sarah entered in her beige uniform. Thinner, older, her salon-perfect hair, now showing gray roots. She stopped when she saw me, surprise flickering across her face. We sat across from each other at a scarred table, decades of other people's pain etched into its surface. I didn't think you'd come, she said finally. Neither did I. Silence stretched between us, heavy with everything that couldn't be unsaid or undone. How are they, Emma and Ryan? Thriving. Emma starts law school in the fall. She wants to be a prosecutor. Sarah's laugh was bitter. Following in your footsteps, the right way. Ryan's different, quieter. He wants to be a teacher, help kids who've been through trauma. Because of what we did to him. Because of who he chooses to be despite what you did. She flinched but didn't argue. I've been going to meetings. AA, even though alcohol wasn't my addiction. Money was. Power. The high of getting more, having more, being more than everyone else. And now I have nothing except time to think about the people I hurt. Brad's victims come sometimes. Not to visit me, but I see them visiting other inmates. Mrs. Murphy was here last week. She's living with her daughter getting by, because of us. The restitution fund has helped recover about 60% of the stolen money. It's not enough, but it's something. I know. I've been following the news. She hesitated, then pulled out a small notebook. I've been writing them letters. Apologies. My counselor sends them only if the victims want to receive them. Most don't. We talked for an hour. Not as father and daughter, but as two people examining the wreckage of what greed could do. She told me about prison life, the work programs, the education classes she was taking. I told her about the foundation I'd started with my remaining assets helping elderly fraud victims. "I have 5 more years minimum before parole consideration," she said as our time ended. "I don't expect you to come again, but I'm grateful you came today." I stood to leave, then turned back. "Sarah, you asked in your letter about becoming worthy of being my daughter again. You need to understand something. Worth isn't about deserving my name. It's about deserving your own. Find out who Sarah Morrison is without the theft, without the greed. That's the only person worth becoming." Outside, Emma and Ryan waited by the car, anxiety clear on their faces. "How was she?" Emma asked. "Broken. Maybe beginning to heal. Time will tell. Do you think you'll visit again?" I considered the question as we drove away from the prison. Maybe. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. It's a process. Like justice, it takes time. A year later, the foundation held its first fundraising gala. We'd helped recover funds for dozens of elderly fraud victims, provided legal services for those fighting financial abuse, and lobbied for stronger protection laws. The ballroom was filled with supporters, survivors, and advocates. I was preparing my keynote speech when Emma found me in the green room. She held an envelope, her expression unreadable. "This came to the foundation office. It's addressed to you." Inside was a check for $500 and a note in Sarah's handwriting. "From my prison work wages, for the foundation. It will take me 40 years to repay what we stole, but this is a start. Essam." I showed it to Ryan, who'd been helping with the event setup. He read it twice, then looked at me with eyes too wise for 17. "It's not about the money, is it?" "No, son, it never was." During my speech that night, I talked about justice and redemption, about the wolves who prey on the vulnerable, and the shepherds who protect them. But I also talked about transformation, how sometimes the wolf realizes what it's become and chooses to change. Elder abuse is uniquely cruel because it exploits trust, I told the audience. It turns love into a weapon. But we're here tonight because we believe in something stronger than greed, the power of justice to heal, to restore, to transform. The foundation grew. Emma graduated law school and joined the prosecutor's office specializing in elder abuse cases. Ryan became a counselor working with children who'd experienced family trauma. They visited their mother occasionally, building something new from the ashes of what had been. Brad was less fortunate. His fellow inmates discovered he'd stolen from elderly veterans. Prison justice is its own kind of reckoning. He survived but spent most of his sentence in protective custody, isolated and forgotten. He never contacted his children again. 5 years after the trial, on what would have been Martha's 75th birthday, I stood at her grave with Emma and Ryan. We brought yellow roses, her favorites, and stories of the lives we'd rebuilt. "She would be proud," Emma said, arranging the flowers carefully. "Of you two, absolutely," I agreed. "You've become everything she would have hoped." "And of you," Ryan added quietly, "for fighting back, for protecting us, for showing us that justice matters." As we walked back to the car, Emma linked her arm through mine. "Grandpa, do you ever regret exposing Mom, sending her to prison?" I thought of Sarah's letters, increasingly thoughtful as the years passed. Of the foundation helping victims. Of these 2 remarkable young adults who'd learned hard lessons about integrity and choice. "I regret that it was necessary," I said finally. But justice isn't about comfort, it's about truth. And sometimes the truth is that people we love do terrible things. That doesn't mean we stop loving them, but it does mean we stop enabling them. The wolf never fully went back to sleep after that. But he didn't need to hunt anymore. Instead, he taught others to protect themselves, to recognize predators, even when they wore familiar faces. Especially then. Martha always said I was too hard on crime, too soft on family. Turns out she was wrong about one of those things. But in the end, being hard on crime meant protecting family, the innocent, the vulnerable, even if sometimes that meant protecting them from each other. The greatest inheritance we can leave our children isn't money or property or even reputation. It's the knowledge that justice matters, that truth has value, and that sometimes the hardest battles are against the people we love most. Because real love doesn't steal, it protects, it sacrifices. And sometimes it holds people accountable for their choices, no matter how much that hurts. That's what the Wolf of Denver taught his grandchildren. And in the end, maybe that's what he was always meant to teach. The story ends where it began, in a courtroom. But this time, it's Emma standing at the prosecutor's table pursuing justice for another elderly victim of family fraud. I sit in the gallery, a proud grandfather watching his legacy continue the right way. Justice, after all, runs in the family. We just had to remember what that really meant.